We jump into Likutei Moharan. Here we are in Torah Yud Aleph. In Torah Yud Aleph. And we began yesterday the beginning of the lesson where we spoke about a number of things. We spoke about the Yichudi Ilah and the Yichudi Hata. This, that a Jew has to always try to bring together two realities. One reality that's completely transcendent, overwhelming. This realization of Ein Od Malvado Kipshutai, that by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, really, by Him Hani Hashem Lo Shinisi, that everything by Hashem is just totally homogeneously infinite, and that's a reality that we have to have hovering over our consciousness. That's very important, like the Baal Tanya explains, that if a Jew ever wants to be b'simcha, they just have to remember that fact, that reality, that in truth, he says, V'hi kirvas elikim mamish, right? That's mamish kirvas elikim, to realize that, godliness is everything. And then there's the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusai, that aspect of the Yichud Tata, of the fact that there is a world, and that we interact with the world as reality, and that in our interaction with the world, it's possible to discover a little bit of godliness that we can manifest and reveal through our interactions with the world, and that's the Yichud Tata. And the Rebbe says that through that a person can come to understand the amkus of Torah la'amka, to delve into the depth of it. And in order to do that, we learned that a person has to use their mouth in order to speak words of Torah. We spoke about that if a person wants life, if a person wants to connect to the Torah, which is life, they have to use their klei adibor to speak. And that was the whole remez of Tevenat Machlis Lefraim. How are you going to bring Tivunas HaTorah to people who are so low in the Afar? And Moshe Rabbeinu answered them, because Amri Inshi, right? When people speak the words of Torah, then Lamasa Yarka, that will shine for all the places where tshuva is necessary. We said Yarak is a reference to tshuva from Avram Avinu Vayarak as Chanichav. He prepared them with Parshas Shoftim, which is tshuva, and Amri Inshi, right? Lamasa Yarka Shukol, and that can bring a person to Chuvas HaMishkal, which absolutely remarkably enough, Ramendi sent me the Rambam, what was it, Rambam Yomi, that the Rambam of yesterday was Chuvas HaMishkal. Right, it was exactly what we had spoken about if you have a person who's place with the Isa Yisho, with the same taiva and whatever, and there he withholds himself. So that's the ultimate tshuva, and that's literally the what we learned. The Yarka Shukal from Rebbe Nachman and the Rambam are dancing in Shemayim together, and an unbelievable hashkacha. Okay, so let's take a look now at Eis Beis. And the Rebbe says, in order for this dibur to shine for the person, the way to ensure that happens is by keeping the glory and honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu front and center in the person's Torah learning experience. This is connected to Torah Vav, when we learned that the whole Inyan, why are existing in this world in the first place, is to be memayit our own kavod, is to increase our honor and to decrease our honor and to increase the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the inyan of Baruch Shem Kivod Malchusai, right, which is the Yichud Tata, meaning in as much as I exist, if I am mavatal myself to the real reality of Ein Od Malvado, which is Yichudi Ilah, so then Mela naturally I'm going to increase, meaning my lived experience of individuality is going to be devoted to increasing emunah in that reality, right? And thereby that reality will seep, so to speak, through the apparent parameters of our existence, and that becomes the glory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the light that's mavhik, that's shining forth from behind the garment with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu enclothes himself, as the Medrash tells us on the pasuk Ha'id v'Hada Lefanav. No, not that pasuk. On the pasuk Geis Lavish. No, Oita Ar Kisalma, rather, on that pasuk. There are a number of pasukim that are relevant, but Oita Ar Kisalma, right? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu wore a garment, and then the light was mavik, the light shines forth. That's the Ibn Yichud Ta'ata, the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's impossible for this process to be complete unless a person keeps Hashem's kavod front and center. Hainu sheyireh, she'akvod Hashem yisbarach b'shleimus, that it should really all be about Hashem. She'akvod la'ayin neged kvod Hashem yisbarach, that one's own kavod should be nullified, like we learned in Torah Dalid about ayin, right, about what it means to nullify oneself beyond all forms and to connect to the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's beyond, that's within, that's completely transcendent. Hainu ayidei anava v'katnus, when a person is an anav, and a person is a katan, and a person recognizes that they're only here as a shliach, so then that's going to increase the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the yichud tata that enables the revelation of the yichud ilah through Baruch Shem Kevod Malchusai, that's reflecting Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Ki ikar b'chinas hadibur mikavod, because dibur really is all about kavod. Kama shekasav mihu zeh melech hakavod, who is the king of glory, and we know that Malchus, I know Malchus is pet. Malchus is always associated with the faculty of speech, because Malchus is the creative element, right? From an experiential standpoint, it's the world around us that we're experiencing. Baruch Hashem, getting brighter and brighter. This morning I wasn't sure if I got nervous. I looked out the window; it was like much brighter than usual, which is just a nice sign that Baruch Hashem we're getting to Pesach and to Chodesh Aviv, Chazei Hashem. But ultimately, this whole natural world is Malchus. Hashem created it with speech. Malchus is associated with peh. And about Malchus, we have the pasuk Mihuzeh Melech HaKavod. A much closer pasuk, which he already brought, is Baruch Shem Kevod Malchusai. Right? There also you see Kavod and Malchus are connected, and there are many myriad of psukim and Mamar Chazal that are demonstrating the correlation and the connection between Kavod and Malchus. These are just two of them. I know Malchus Peh. And so Dibur is going to be very much associated with Malchus. Because if Torah comes into the mouth of someone who is Pagum, and Diburim Pegumim, which in this context is an arrogant Peh, which is a person who's utilizing Torah for their own gain, as opposed to shining a spotlight just on Hashem, says the Rebbe, not only won't the light of Torah shine for that person like we hope that it would, because not only that, the Torah could be darkened by that person's mouth, and not all Torah is created equal. Right? This is unlike, maybe standard prevailing, theory. It's just Torah. Not always. It really depends, because loy zachan asasam maves. Not so simple. It's anivos. That's what the focus should be now. If a person is an anav, is engaged in Torah properly for dveikus and Hashem, nothing higher in the world. But if it isn't, then there's nothing worse. Sam maves. And that's what we're learning over here. He says, not only isn't it meir, but a terrible, scary thing. The Torah is transformed, chas v'shalom, into a kardam, right? I think is the lashon lachter, but like it turns into a terrible weapon. Kamashikasav, the pasuk in Yeshua says, La yamush sefer Torah zemipicha. Right in the beginning, Yeshua tells the people, let the words of the sefer Torah not depart. That's what it means on a simple level. La yamush ha-Torah hazemipicha. Let the Torah not depart from your mouth. But the Rebbe says that word yamush could mean depart, to leave, like mush, which means removed or separate. But the Rebbe also says that it could be a reference to darkness. V'chinas, like it says by the Makas Choshech, Vayamesh Choshech. And there it's a lashon of touching, right? It was so thick, the darkness, like they say, the silence was so, you could cut it with a knife. You could feel the darkness. Vayamesh Choshech. So says the Rebbe, go back to the pasuk in Yeshua and use the word Vayamesh in the context of Vayamesh Choshech as a reference to understand what La Yamush means. And over here, Rebbe Nachman says the pasuk is telling us La Yamush Sefer Torah Hazeh Mipicha. Let the Torah not grow dark because chas v'shalom of our mouths. V'chinas vayamesh choshech. Hainu shalai yizgashmu v'yischashku mipicha. We have to be careful when we're using Torah that why are we saying it? Who is it benefiting? Right? And to make sure that it's bringing out the glory of Hashem, the glory of the Torah, the glory of the tzaddikim, not our own glory, which is ayin and nothing. Kehal Yedidim Now when a person is learning and they're not making sure that to keep the dynamic proper and appropriate, that they are just glimpsing into the glory and the treasure houses of the king, that it's not their own. They don't come to arrogance because of it. When a person is stuck in that way, then they might be able to use their words, but they're really not able to open their mouths in any significant way, right? Meaning because there's a certain delicate speech that isn't activated in a person who is speaking Torah that's darkened. HaKadosh Baruch Hu closes the mouths of those who speak arrogantly. And Kamaisa de Levi Bar Sisai, there's a Gemara in Yerushalmi and Yavamas, which tells the story of a certain Bar Sisai, that he got promoted to a very, very high and special position. Please let's make sure that we're muted if anybody's joining the call. She'alu Labima, where they lifted him up and they put him on a big platform, and he was about to speak the return of Tipach Ruche Alav, and he became arrogant, and the Gemara says, V'lo Yanivun, and he wasn't able to utter a word. This is what happened. His voice shut off. And this is a reflection of the pasuk Sagru Pimai Dibur Begeyas, because if somebody's speaking in an arrogant way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take away their Klei HaDibur. And by the way, you should just know that this is a very sensitive point for Rebbe Nachman, because this really was the cause of the whole machlokes that in some way we're still suffering from today between Rebbe Nachman and the Shpal Zayda. Because what happened was, right, and this is how at least it's brought in Breslov literature, was that there was a chazan who was appointed, I think I mentioned this, was appointed to daven for the Yamnei Raim in the shul in Breslov. Rebbe Nachman was there, and he was sort of, the Rav of Breslov relinquished the authority to Rebbe Nachman that he should be the one who's deciding what's going on. And Rebbe Nachman wasn't happy with this person who was davening. He said that this person is not davening. He said he's not davening for Hashem, he's davening for his wife and his mother-in-law. He says some lashon like that. I mean, he's davening to impress people. He says his focus is not in the right place. And Rebbe Nachman tried to have him removed, that he should be replaced by somebody who's going to actually daven properly. Didn't happen. He got up there, and he completely lost his voice. He wasn't able to daven at all. He couldn't make a sound. And he was so embarrassed and ashamed and angry that he went and slandered Rebbe Nachman to the Shpal Zayda and said all kinds of terrible things, and the whole machlokes started. But this is a point that Rebbe Nachman knows well, and he even knew how to flick that switch if need be. Sagru Pimai Dibru Begeyas, Kamaisid Levi Bar Sisa, again, Shalu Labima, Tipach Rucha Alav, V'lo Yanivun. And he couldn't make a word. Because the Rebbe says we learned in Torah Yud that Gaiva is Mamash Avodah Zarah, right? And we said all a while that Avodah Zarah is in the world, Charein Af is in the world, right? Gaiva is Mamash Avodah Zarah. Literally, a person turns himself like Haman, he turns himself, or power, he turns themselves into an Avodah Zarah. Now, about Avodah Zarah, the pasuk says, "Psile elehein tisrufim be'esh." You have to burn it in fire. It has to be completely destroyed. That aspect of gaiva needs to be destroyed, and then we know from the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah v'chala oimid lisruf kisarav dami. There's a klal that anything that is supposed to be burned is ki'ilu already burned, right? And that's what the Gemara over there is speaking about, using a shofar, right, that was used for Avodah Zarah on Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara says it's not even possible. Forget about the fact that it's usher. It's not possible. So what do you mean it's not possible? We have a shofar in front of us. Says the Gemara, halacha considers that shofar not to exist. Because kala oimed l'sarif kesarif tami michtas susei michtas shiurei. It's, you cannot use a shofar that's burnt, right? So it's not burnt. It is burnt. Because anything that's supposed to be burnt is already burnt. That means that even if the person, his voice and his mouth are still working, but really, it's ki'ilu because it's kala oimid lisrav kisarav dami, because it's avodah zarah and it ought to be burnt, right? Meaning that this person ought to completely, decimate that element within themselves. It's ki'ilu chsuse michtas shiurei kemuva begemar le'inin shayfer shalvaris alilim v'kevin shemichtas kasis shiurei ein leklei adiba l'daber imam. And that's the reference to a shofar. Harim k'shofar karlecha. Right? The shofar is connected to voice. It's connected to speech. And if a person is not using their speech properly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shutting it off. And it's ki'ilu, it's michtas, ksuse michtas shiurei. However, but if a person is really careful and guarding the Kvod Hashem and everything that they say and everything that they do, that the person recognizes that themselves on their own is nothing to celebrate, and that they're mamish, literally a sack of blood and other things made out of skin, essentially, and we're just basar v'dam, and we're just limited, extraordinarily limited and fragile and small. But because of the chelik elokam yibal inside of us, we have infinite power, but not because of us, because of it, right? Because of the true self, right, which is the capital S of the godliness inside of us, but not the lowercase s of our own subjective experience. And when a person is living with that consciousness, then the words are diburim hami'irim, then the words shine, and the words are lichtig, and the words bring about k'vod shamayim, and the words help people recognize the greatest of tzaddikim, and the whole earth is illuminated mikvaydai, and the kavod is the kavod of Hashem. And then those words can help to guide a person to tshuva. If you're joining the call, please remember to mute immediately as you join the call. Mute yourself, please. Thank you so much. We have to switch. I'm just going to pause the shiur for a second. We must switch to Zoom. This is Binah going to be the last day that we do the voice call. It's just too difficult. Can somebody take achrayas for running the Zoom? You have the Zoom app. You can set it up. Okay, Binah. Tomorrow we're going to have a Zoom and we'll post the link. It's just too disruptive. And that will shine for the person to be able to do tshuva. I'm a bit nostalgic. It's emotional. I'll never have to say mute yourself ever again. The door is closed. New chapter. And you'll have to be able then to come to and then a person will be able to come to tfunas atar la'amka, to really understand the depth of Torah, by making themselves. It's almost like, the smaller I think this is true. The smaller the athlete, the faster they can run, right? Or the quicker they can swim. Or if a person makes themselves small, they make themselves like more aerodynamic. You can move a lot quicker. We're not encumbered by our own heaviness. A person is delicate, and a person can travel. Now says the Rebbe Nachman weiter in Eis Gimel. But kavod b'shleimus. Now, how do you get kavod b'shleimus? What would that mean? Right. So now we're saying that a person needs to live with the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu front and center in their lives, and then their diburim are going to be diburim ni'irim, and then I'm sorry if the sun is bothering you. I didn't create it, huh?
That's great.
It's starting to bother me a bit. Okay, good. So and then the diburim are able to be diburim ni'irim. And that will bring the person to tshuva, and tshuva ultimately is to be miyachid, the yichudi ilah and the yichudi tata in one's life. But how does a person come to be able to do kavod b'shleimus? Says the Rebbe of kavod b'shleimus, einai ki imayde vav sheyamshich l'seicha. The main thing with kavod is the vav inside of it, because if you take the vav out of kavod, you know what you get? Kabbaloi vav nishar kvad peh. If you take the vav out of kavod, it's kvad peh. And kvad peh is the issue that we're speaking about. Dibru sagru pimoi dibru begeyos, right? That when there's arrogance, when there's the opposite of the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then that's causing kvad peh. So in order that there shouldn't be kvad peh, what do you have to bring into the kvad? The vav, kavod. Kvad heavy, like kaved, right? Val yedei vav, like encumbered lashon. Val yedei, which is gaiva, right? Because something that's kaved is heavy. And it's also Amalek oriented, because Amalek is ice. Ice is very heavy, karach, as opposed to water. Val yedei vav, or it's a little bit flipped, because water is heavier and ice floats, right? So yeah, I take that back. No, not that. I'm not going to associate it with that. That's another Torah. That's the opposite of that. But okay. Val yedei vav ubechinas kavod v'lo yidayim. When you put the vav in the kvad, which was previously kvad peh, and a person couldn't get a word out because of the gaiva. When you put a vav in there, it turns into kavod, and then kavod is v'lo yidayim. Then the person will never be silenced. So you have on the one hand kvad peh, and on the other hand, with the addition of a vav, you have kavod and v'lo yidayim, right? Which is the opposite of the kvad peh, where a person is stuttering, like it says by Moshe Rabbeinu, and unable to produce a word. Ki kol makom shenemar vav hu ma'isiv, says the Rebbe. Okay, but what is that vav? How do you have a vav that's placed within the kvad? Right? How does a person who's not in the inyan of kavod, who's in kvad peh, how do they get the vav? Says the Rebbe, Ki kol makom shenemar vav hu moisiv. Anytime, we had in the previous lesson, anytime you see a vav, it is additive. Vav is and, right? It comes to add something else. This is the aspect of adding on kedusha, the bechina of Yosef, right? Taisif, Moisif. That's what we learned in the previous lesson, right? That ve'elev vav Moisif al rishonis, that was the bechina of Yosef at Tzadik. Hainu shmiras habris. This is the aspect of Shmiras Habris, because it says, Kol makom she'ata moitze geder erva, ata moitze kedusha. Anytime that a person adds on another geder erva in their life, a person puts on another filter, a person avoids certain relationships, a person avoids certain places, but whatever it is that a person makes for themselves in their own struggle with this, a geder erva, ata moitze kedusha. You just added kedusha into your life. That's a taisvus kedusha. That's the Binah of Yosef, Moisef. You added additional kedusha into your life by making a geder erva, because Rebbe Nachman says it's very simple. Ki zeh tali bazeh. These two things are corresponding one to the other. Geus v'niyav. Arrogance and adultery. And I want to clarify. When we say geos and gaiva in this context, it doesn't mean, and that's right, Reb Jeremy, I think there's a slight misunderstanding. We were speaking yesterday. I don't mean arrogance, like arrogance. I don't mean that. I don't that, you're right. That kind of arrogance has nothing to do with depression or sadness. What we mean over here is an orientation of a person's consciousness that is focused on themselves as an authentic, independent entity. That's what we mean by arrogance. And such a person maybe has no self-confidence. It can still be arrogant. You understand? And that's what the Ali Shur meant when he said that sadness, not clinical depression, but sadness is oftentimes a result of gaiva. Even though it's not gaiva, it's not arrogant, but the person is so convinced that there's nothing else in them, right? You understand something? It could be the opposite. Gaiva can shut, and that's what I was mentioning the other day, because it could be either rum or it could be maur, but it's also gaiva. Right, but it doesn't mean arrogance. It doesn't mean, it's not coming from, but it is coming from, or it can sometimes be a result, or many times be a result of a person that turns themselves into a chaticha on their own, right? Something that's split off from a broader picture, whether it's a broader community network, whether it's a religious framework, whether it's a theology, an existential theology, with the realization that they are just a spark of something much bigger, and so on. That is very healing and very healthy for people. When a person sees themselves in a broader context, that means that they have something to add, they have something valuable. As opposed to when a person considers themselves a closed system, then if they happen not to be feeling too good about themselves, the whole world is over, And so just to clarify what we mean when we say gaiva, it's a little bit more nuanced in this context. And in this context, says Rebbe Nachman, yes, gaiva and niyuf are absolutely connected together, because that's what it's all about. That's really what it's all about. The depth of it is that the person is looking to magnify their own physical experience and their physical gratification, or even beyond that, a person is looking to be valued, right? Which is really the depth of that, and we can go much, much, much deeper into this taiva, which is extraordinarily deep and nuanced and central. Obviously, it's the yesod of who we are, and so there are so many layers emotionally. It's not like another taiva. This is something that's literally, it sits at the essence of our humanity, quite literally, and so it's very deep. But the Rebbe says, nonetheless, these two things are totally one and the other, like Chazal say al pasuk, ve'eshes ish nefesh yikara tatzud. A person who considers themselves to be yikara, they are susceptible to falling into the b'chin of eshes ish. The alkain, therefore, bris mechuna b'shem shakai. Therefore, the bris, which is the sphere of Yesod, like we said, all the different lower spheres are correlated with the different names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelations. Chesed is Kel, Elikim is Geulah, Tiferes Yud Kei Vav Kei, Netzach and Hoyd, Hashem Tzavakas, Elikim Tzavakas, and Yesod is Shakai. And we find that in the context of psukim that refer to Piri Verivia. Kamei Shekasav, Ani Kel Shakai, Prei Urevei. Says Rebbe Nachman, what is the name Shakai doing connected to bris? Why is the name Shakai associated with the sphere of Yesod? So the Rebbe says, because what's Shakai? Ki Shakai, this name Shin Daled Yud, Hu Bechinas, is Shakai, Sheyesh, the Shin is Sheyesh Dai. Sheyesh Dai is Shakai. Sheyesh Dai Be'elikusu L'chol Bria. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says there's enough godliness to go around. All that there is me. It's my godliness that's filling every human being. It's all me. It's not you. It's an illusion. You have a soul that you think that your soul is running your body. Says God, I'm the soul to your soul. Or puppets. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is pulling the strings. So it's all about Him and His will, and not about us and ours. She is die belikusa l'chabria. That's what shakai is. But when a person is not working on this inyan of shmiras abris, again, shomer abris, we're not talking about perfection. We're talking about a person who's conscious of it and making every effort that they can on a practical level, on a healing level, on a psychological level to get this area of their life under control. That's called shmiras abris. Because there are millions of madrigas to it. A person's on the journey, but a person's genuinely, and you'll know. You can have a guy who has 50 filters on his phone, but he knows that he's not shomer bris because he's just doing that to pretend to people he has a filter on his phone. But meanwhile, he has an app that through the app you can get to whatever you can get to. That's not called shomer bris. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a person who's authentically working on this and genuinely trying to work on this inyan, which Baruch Hashem, I believe all of us are. Be'ezus Hashem. So when a person is doing that, so then there's shomer abris. Kishe'eina shomer abris, hainu al yidei geyos hu oisa la'atzmei avodas elilim. So then a person makes themselves into an avodas elilim, and hu mare she'ein dai lo ve'elikusai, right? And that's demonstrated. That's a begam in shakai, because shakai meant that I really believe that dai ve'elikusa l'chol bria, which the mamakam of this as it relates to shmiras abris, is that I don't need to go looking beyond the boundary of halacha for my satisfaction. If God says that this is what I need at this point in my life, and this is how Hashgacha has it, whether a person is married, whether a person is not married, which makes it much more difficult, whatever it is, but a person says, this is what God gave me. I'm okay. Now, like I said, nobody died from lack of acting out in that way. Nobody died. So like there's no, that's not a cause of death. Like you'll be okay. You know what I'm saying? It's difficult, but a person can withhold and a person can work on this. But the point is that if a person doesn't do that, then it's a pegam and shakai, because they're demonstrating that actually ein dai belukusa l'chol bria, because I am an independent entity on my own, and a person's going to seek out their own personal gratification to the blemishing and to the subverting of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will in this area, which is literally the demarcating factor between humans and animals, is this area of life. And that's why the bris is the completion of the human form, right? The inyan of the bris, at least in males, is the completion of the human form, because it's a physical representation of how emotionally and spiritually this is literally what makes us human, right? Is this area, and to the degree that we're successful in this, we become more human to work on this value. So he says, if a person isn't doing this, then a person is making a blemish in the area of shakai. Then he's showing that I don't need that. He needs an idol, right? He turns himself into an idol. And this was also the connection between to the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, which was also a reflection of this Nekuda. The Svarim HaKadoshim say that it was an inyan of Ereva, that inyan. And that's why, there was an inyan of adultery, like we learned. There was an inyan of that. Because essentially what it means is, God said this, but you can disregard it. It's not relevant. Because you want that. Because nechmad le'einayim. Because that looks good. And that's the bechina of Gai V'Avodah Zarah. But then a person merits to have an or, to have a light that comes into a person's life. That's the result, and we've lost this in this generation, the sweetness of self-control. We've lost that. Because it's so much easier not to, and it looks so much better, but it's so much worse. Because there's a sweetness to self-control, and it's not the same thing. Well, like, let's make a distinction semantically between pleasure and joy, right? There might be less pleasure in it from the standpoint of physical gratification, but the joy of being in control, right? The joy of being a person with dignity, the joy of being a person who has principles and stands by them and is willing to sacrifice for them, achi magas, to the point within the person's capacity. That's a tremendous joy for a person to live in that way. Then there's a tremendous light that shines for the person. Yeah, question?
Can you clarify why he brings in Kedusha to this? He says the Vav is a difference between Kavod and Kavod, and then why does he say Tosefes Kedusha as opposed to Tosefes anything else?
Because the Vav, first of all, we're going to see in Eis Daled more specifically, but because Vav is the Hosafa, right? And if you think about the concept in spirituality of what you want to increase, you're going to want to be increasing Kedusha all the time, right? Vav, and also, like I said before, the Vav is the aspect of Yosef. Yosef HaTzadik is the paradigm of Shmiras Abris, right, with Eshes Potifar, That aspect, I think right today there's this video thing, Vayima'in, where they send out videos of Shemir Sabris. Yosef HaTzadik was the... And Yosef is Lohosiv. He's being Moisiv Kedusha. And I would also add, because the flip side is Gaiva, right? If you were learning Be'iyah, we would say the flip side of Yosef is Hosafa de Sitracha, or a person's increasing, puffing up, like we learned in Torah, of a person's chametz, right? Which is a person's own puffing up of a nefesh yikara tatzot. And so the question is, what are we increasing? In that moment, you're going to increase one of two things. You're going to increase our own physicality, our own subjective experience of gratification, which is our own self, or we're going to add HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light in the world. And so, right, so, and then he connects it to the bechina of kol makom she'ata moitze geder erva ata moitze kedusha. That's additive, right? You're making more gedarim, moitze kedusha. More gedarim, you're finding more kedusha in your life, and that's the bechina of vav. Okay. But the real reason is, that's in that paragraph, but the real reason is, take a look in Ois Dalid, va'ar hazeh hu bechinas tal oiros. Says Rebbe Nachman, this light is the light of tal oiros, the 39 lights. That's the aspect of the holy dew, the dew that's effervescent and that gives vitality and that gives shmira to the plants and that keeps them fresh. Tal chayim, tal oiros. There are 39 lights. What are these 39 lights? Haklulin v'vav shall kavod. They are all wrapped up into the letter vav. This is a bechina of the pasuk in Eov, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Hein kol eli yifal kel pamayim shalishim gaver." HaKadosh Baruch Hu is causing consequences in a person's life up to 3 times, and then there's another pasuk elsewhere that says, Rashi brings it over there, that val arba v'lo yashivenu, but the 4th time Hashem says, that's it, that I'm putting my foot down, so to speak. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with a person up until 3 times pamayim shalishim gaver. But the Svarim say pamayim shalish, or Rebbe Nachman saying over here, but it's brought in Mekubalim, pamayim shalish. That is referring, anytime that we have the word 3 or 4 or 2, we have to bring it back to its most primordial and essential reference. Right, and what would be the most essential reference of 1, 2, 3, 4? Is of course Yud Kei Vav Kei. You bring it back to the most, fundamental, what the Ramchal very usefully calls the Seder HaKlali. Right, that like the first fractal. Like the first one out of all which all the fractals are created. That's the Seder HaKlali of Yud Kei Vav Kei in that aspect. And if you take the first 3 letters of Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei, and you spell it out, with, again, the Miluyim, Yud, Hey, Vav, is 39. The Milui, spelling 39. So, Pamayim, Shalish, and Mechinas, Tal, Oiros. These 3 letters, Yud, and Hey, and Vav, spelled out, which he's about to do in a minute, is the 39 light, Shal Milui, Shalish, Oisios, Rishonis. That's Pamayim, Shalish. Right, that if you open up these 3 letters, that's going to give you 39 pirish, which means, says Reb Nassan, Ki shalosh oisios rishonos shel shem Yud Kei Vav Kei Shem Havaya b'milei alfin. If you spell them with an aleph, right? So it's Yud Vav Dalid Hey Aleph Vav Aleph. Vav Aleph Vav. They are gematria. All those letters are gematria tal, gematria 39. Ve'im bechinas tal oiros. They are called in Kabbalah the 39 lights. Ve'im klulim ha'vav shel Hashem, and it's essentially Chochmah, Binah. And yes, and the 6 midas, right, that are all coming together. That's 39, and then from there they get transmitted through Yesod, which is the very bottom of the Vav, right, Ali? So you understand, right? Yesod, because the Vav is the 6 midas from Chesed down to Yesod. If you have your chart in front of you, whatever it is, right? So it goes down. So Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Yesod is called the Yud that appears at the Puma Da'ama. That's the Yud that appears at the very, very, very bottom of the Vav. So Yesod is the culmination of the letter Vav. That's a deeper reason, like I mentioned, why the Vav is going to be a reference to Shmir Sabris. So when you have those 3, which is Yud Kei Vav, im Gaver, they get included in the inyan of bris. Shem klulim babris. They all get included in the bris, just like when the male is experiencing yichud and zivug, their whole self, which is their Chochmah and their Binah, and all of their midas get wrapped into this concentrated, seminal, kipshutai drop, right, which is then able to be transmitted, right? And that word gever is a reference to bris, because the pasuk says pamayim shalosh, and where does all that go? Those 39 lights of Yud and Hey and Vav, which are the three shalosh, where do they go? Im gaver. They all get channeled down into the bris. And how do we know that the bris is connected to the inyan of gever? It says the Rebbe ki ish gvurasai, because the Gemara says it's a pasuk. Right? The Gemara brings it for the reference to ki ish gvurasai, that as large as a person is, right? So that then the bris is that same inyan ki ish, and the reference that the Gemara is using to learn that drasha over there, which is speaking about the intimate relationships that are had by very, very, very large people, right? And how is that possible? They're so obese, right? And maybe people are going to say that the children aren't theirs, and so on. And the answer, and the Gemara says over there, kiki ish gvurasai, because every part of them is large, right? And we learn it from that pasuk, kiki ish gvurasai. And so gevura in that context is a reference to the bris. Val shem zenikra bris bayaz, and that's why the bris is connected to the figure of bayaz, who we know the Gemara says had the most difficult the most difficult struggle with Shmir Sabris, that he was in a place where not like Yosef, right, and not like Palti ben Laish, but right, he had the most difficult struggle, that he was mamish ready to do the act with Rus, and he withheld himself. All right, ad kedei kach. And that the bayaz also represents Shmir Sabris, but the Tikkun Ezra says if you open up the word bayaz, it says boy ois, boy tukfa. That's where a person's strength is. Kiki ish gvurasai. That's the inyan of a person's strength. So that's if a person is a shomer abris, you're zeicha to all the tal oiros, all the 39 lights that are manifesting from the yud of the person, which is the Chochmah, to the hey of the person, which is the Binah, to the vav of the person, which is the 6 spheres. All of it is yud, hey, vav, 39 tal oiros. It's fresh, it's vital. The person has their own life force inside of them. But if a person is letting go of this inyan of their concentrated tal oyros, who mekalkala tal oyros, this is going to blemish and distort the 39 lights, and this is going to cause for a person struggles with parnasa. And again, you can't say this, as a blanket rule. There are no blanket rules, and Hashem could have millions of different hanhagas, and it could be that a person's the biggest shomer abris in the world, and their parnasa is not working out. You could have a person's the biggest paigam abris in the world, and their parnasa is working out. We have to be very, very careful never to make absolute statements. Rebbe Nachman is not making an absolute statement. There are no absolutes in Yiddishkeit, because we don't know anything from Hashem's planning. You can't manipulate it. But the Rebbe says this is a truth. This is a factor. And this is what, if anybody listens to Gedalia Fenster, this is his whole thing, right? Success in parnasa, Shmir Sabris. He really believes it. He feels that in his own life, that's what opened up the gates of Shefa for him, because he just read this in some English, collection of Rebbe Nachman's teachings. He took it seriously, got that area of his life under control, and really worked on it, and opened up the gates of Shefa. So, but we have to say that although we believe that it is true, we have to be very careful to start making moral judgments about where people must be holding in their Shmir Sabris based on how they're doing financially. That's not what we're doing.
It doesn't say parnasa. It says parnasa, i.e. your perception, how your relationship with your parnasa.
Maybe, yes, could be, yeah.
The examples given here are with boys and with
Rus, yes.
But also Yosef is that those are obviously forbidden relations. They were forbidden. Relationships, as it were.
Yeah.
Is Rebbe Nachman talking about, when he refers to Shmir Sabris, is he talking about forbidden?
Right now, yes. Right, we're gonna get to. You're gonna see in Ice Hay, in Ice Hay, we're gonna speak about permitted relationships in different madrigas there. Right now, we're not up to that. Now we're speaking just kipshutai, Shmir Sabris on a simple level, and we're going to learn about Shmir Sabris on a higher level and what that means within the context of the Asay type. Now we're talking about Surmira. Okay, that's an excellent question. We're going to get there. So this brings upon a person Ola Parnasa, Hainu Tal Malachos, right? Because the 39, which is Tal Chaim, turns into the 39 Malachos, Kamuva B'Zayar, and because it says in the Zar Kadosh, Man Dezarik Pirur Denahama, if a person throws bread. All right, if a person is not careful with the pirurin, which the tzaddikim were so careful Friday night when they cut up the challah, they made sure to take all them. My father's very makbid, right? To take all the crumbs into a spoon and to eat the crumbs, not to let anything go wasted. Chas v'shalom. So the Zohar says, if a person who throws away bread, and he isn't careful, anius radav basrei, poverty is running after that person. So the Zohar says, kol shekei man de zara pirur demoichin. So certainly a person who's not just throwing away their bread, but they're throwing away their brain, right? Their brain power, which we know that the seed comes from the brain, right? From the whiteness of the mayach stima, that can cause anius coming to a person. V'zeu boy az, and that's what we mean when we say boy az, boy eyes. There's a lot of strength in this. A person's whole strength, their whole quality of life is wrapped up into this area. Boy kalul shnei abachinas, because there are two aspects there. Hainu lamed tes oros. There are 39 lights that can be two things to a person. Misha shoym rabris, that a person is shoym rabris. Is 39 times 2 ayin zayin?
Ayin ches.
Gevaldik, that's what it means. Gevaldik, okay. Okay, so boy az, he's making a reference. Boy az is that in the az, right? I had the intuition. I'm not good at math, but I know Likutei Moharan a little bit. Boy az, right, is 39 times 2. Okay, says the Rebbe, there are two types of 39s that can be included here. It can either be tal or it can be lamed tes. You understand? Ois is kalol shnei bechinas. Hainu lamed tes oiros is misha shomer abris, and chas v'shalom v'lamed tes melachais misha poigim boy. Oh, okay. Well, I obviously didn't prepare this well enough. Ki az ima koilel shtei palmim tal. There you go. Because az with the koilel is 2 times tal. I looked this over very late last night, and I must have skipped that over, but I have learned this in the past. Okay, so it includes lametes twice. V'zeu, and that's the pasuk in Pekudei, which says ve'ela pekudei mishkan mishkan eidos, and so you have the word mishkan twice in the pasuk of mishkan shtei pa'amim. Says the Rebbe, why are we making a reference to 2 mishkanos? What's the 2 inyanim of mishkan? Says the Rebbe, shtei pa'amim lametes. Because the Mishkan is Lamates. Because Ki Lamates Malachas Gabrinim and Mishkan. Where do we learn the Lamates Malachas out? From the Mishkan. So the Mishkan is 39. And it's going to be, which 39 do you want? Eile Pekudei Mishkan. Ois, Lamates or Lamates? Which one do we want? Umisha Shoymer Brisai, a person who's Shoymer Bris, Afal Pishu Oisa Lamates Malachas, even though a person is going to work. Hein bechinas maleches hamishkan, says the Rebbe. To such a person, their work is building the Mishkan. When they go to work, they're literally their work is mamish tal chaim, and they're connected to Hashem, and they're conscious of Hashem, and they're on aniva, and they're anavim, and they're focused on Hashem in their work and everything. Hainu Mishkan bibinyane. It's the bechina literally building the shechina bechinas lametes oiros. Their whole life is lit up with 39 lights. But if a person is stuck in this Indian, and again, every person according to their madrega, there's no objective standard, because I believe that people deal with so much from their childhood, and people are abused, and people go through traumas, and it becomes much more an emotional thing than a spiritual thing. Every person on their level, you have to be very careful about this. People could be crushed by learning Torah like this, because let's say a person's working on Shmir Sabris for 4 decades and they haven't managed to budge, but they're really working on it. That's Shmir Sabris. Every person has their Nekudas HaBechira. You have to be very, very careful with it. Okay, but we mean that a person is really actively working on it. And for some people that will mean spiritual work, some people that will mean emotional work, going to therapy, some people that will mean any other kind of intervention within the bounds of normalcy and not poking out a person's eyes, right, which we don't consider to be, the appropriate mahalach, generally speaking, for the general public, right, even though the Gemara obviously speaks about a Tana who did that. Okay, so however, achmisha poigim abris, but a person is just not living in that consciousness, doesn't care, has given up. That person's malachas is the aspect of the destroyed Mishkan. Bechinas lametes malchus. That's instead of lametes, iris, you have lametes malchus, the 39 lashes. Bechinas arbim yakenu v'lo yosef. Where does a person get 39 malchus? Says the Rebbe. Simple, v'lo yosef, because a person wasn't adding on kedusha into their life. See, understand what he's doing? The pasuk says arbim yakenu v'lo yosef. You should be hit with 40, which Chazal says 39. Which is very deep, v'lo yosef, and not more. Says the Rebbe, no. The way that you get 39 Malchus is because v'lo Yosef, because a person was not connecting to Yosef HaTzadik in their life. Which is the aspect of the Tosafa, which is the aspect of the Vav, which is the distinguishing factor between Kvad Peh and Kavoid v'lo Yidaim, which is going to enable a person to either bring the Torah into a Peh, that's Chas v'Shalom Pagum, in which case it's Nischa Sheikh and it's darkening that person's life, or it's Torah that's coming into a Peh that's full of Or, that's being meir for the person and enabling them to live in a consciousness of bringing about the Yichud Ilah and the Yichud Tata. But as Hashem, we'll jump back into this tomorrow morning.
Question.
Yes.
You touched briefly that, depending on what people's challenges are in terms of growing up, if we use well to everyone on their level.
Yes.
Does it say, is that like a PC? Like, is that something which you've got to say, or is that something? Because does Torah legislate for that? As in, like the
Torah legislates. Torah legislates for each and every person to be doing their absolute best. The Mishnah Berurah says every person is only expected to do what they can do. That's a fact, right? That's a fact in Kol Torah Kula. Otherwise, we're all going to Gehenna, right? I mean, otherwise, there's no chance for anybody. The Torah was given. The Torah was given not to angels but to human beings, and every person who's capable to do what they can do. Otherwise, we would never fulfill one mitzvah b'shleimus if we had to do it. The Torah takes into a consideration a person's circumstances. The Torah wants authenticity, and Rebbe Nachman says in the Likutei Moharan that there are myriad levels of Shmir Sabris. Let me be clear. I'm happy for the clarification. I'm glad that we're still recording. Let me be clear. I do not mean to say that now because a person had certain circumstances in life, so then that adjusts what's expected of them. What's expected of them is perfection. What I mean to say is that kol echad yodea maris nafshay, every person is able to know for themselves what is considered to be authentic efforts in this regard, and authentic successes in this regard, given their context. So somebody else, to that would not be a level of Shmir Sabris. They're supposed to strive for much higher. But to this person, this is a gewaldic level of Shmir Sabris, given their past. It is absolutely clear, I think, from all of Chazal. I think this is a davar pashut that the Torah literally legislates for humans and not angels. Do you hear the difference?
Yeah, of course. So essentially, you got to be true to yourself.
That's it. The whole Torah hinges on authenticity. That's the whole Torah. Remember, we learned where there's emes, there's Hashem. If there's not emes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not there. It could look super fancy. If it's not real, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not there. And in this inyan, it's the inyan of la'olam yadam yar shemayim begali, but beseser. This is an inyan where only you know. And only you could really know. This is a place where human bechira are going to say, no, because I saw this website, okay, but you clicked on that website to get to that way. This kind of thing. Only you know. And therefore, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows. So a person has to be dead true to themselves. But the point that I'm making is that there are people who are struggling, right, with this area more from an emotional trauma perspective, right, and as a self-soothing mechanism that might have even started way before the Yetzer Hara kicked in. They don't even know what a Yetzer Hara is, because to them it's not a Yetzer Hara. It's something much, much, much different. To that person, any little bit that they're working on in the area of spirituality in this regard is a huge victory and a huge success. But that doesn't mean that they should settle for that. They should push and strive to reach the madregas that the Torah expects, which is total kedusha and total tahara. But all of life is the ebb and flow, is the ratzah v'shayv, and there's danger on either side of this equation. Right? There's certainly danger here. Chas v'shalom. I don't want anybody chas v'shalom to misinterpret what I'm saying. Chas v'shalom. We don't mean to give people an easy way out at all, but we do mean to recognize that the nature of Shmir Sabris is different for different people, and everybody should celebrate their successes, and everybody should take the next right step for them, and slowly but surely climb out of the darkness. Yeah, is that more clarified? Okay, yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining. All the best. So carry on tomorrow. האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני